Georgia Tech. All right. I mean, another ACC team. ACC's on the come up this year.
Yeah, this
a
is
lot
a
of
very
programs that have a
interesting
lot to be excited about. And the ACC as a whole definitely like hit rock bottom with the undefeated Florida State team not even making the playoff, and then so many down years from teams like Virginia Tech. Well, actually, Virginia Tech's a bad example. They finally had to come up, but like for a lot of the
North
teams,
Carolina had a worse year than I think a lot of people expected last year.
It was a down year for the ACC as a whole, and this year should be a come-up year for the ACC. Yes. And you can throw Georgia Tech right in the mix with Virginia Tech. They have a lot to be excited about here. Head coach Brent Key back for a second season, and the thing is with those three teams, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, it seems like all three of them hit on their head coach because they're all three of those head coaches are in their second or third seasons. This one's Brent Key. His first year with Georgia Tech was last year. They went 7-6, won a bowl game. Was Georgia Tech's first winning season since 2018. So he takes over the team and immediately has a winning season. They did bring in a new defensive coordinator because last year they had Kevin Schur was the interim defensive coordinator, and he got the DC job at Georgia State. I don't think he was fired. I just don't think they ever. I think he was just an interim DC where I don't think he was ever offered the job long term.
Yeah, and I thought they hired.
Yeah, you like really Santucci, right?
Tyler Santucci, top 20 defense last year at Duke with him. I mean, at Duke, having a top 20 defense is unheard of.
That's Elko's defense, though.
He was the one coaching. It's a really good defensive hire there.
So, they bring in Tyler Santucci to be the DC. He was with Duke last year. Before that, he was with Texas A&M for a few years. So, dude knows how to coach a defense. So you would have to think. I don't know too much about him. You'd have to think that's a good hire. Georgia Tech's 44th in returning production, 13 returning starters, just 5 on defense, which could be a concern. We'll get to that. But on the offensive side of the ball, there's not much to dislike here. Similar to Virginia Tech, this is a team that thinks they have their quarterback. Yep. Haynes King is back. Over 2,700 yards last year, 26 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. He also can use his legs. And also, there's another Haynes that runs the ball. So Haynes King is the quarterback, and they bring their running back, Jamal Haynes, back over 1,000 yards last year. They did lose their RB2, but they're good. Quarterback, running back, they're good. Receiving weapons, maybe a little bit more question mark. They lost both their tight ends that they liked, but I think they brought in 2 tight ends through the portal. I don't know much about the receiving weapons, but from what I'm reading, one of the receivers they brought in is from Mississippi State, I think, or maybe the tight end.
Yes.
So from what I'm reading, they like what they have as receiving weapons, but I personally don't know much about it. 4 starters back on the offensive line. 4 of their 5 starters back on the offensive line, and their 5th starter is a transfer from Middle Tennessee who started last year. So they bring in, it's 4 starters back, and then the 5th starter is replaced with a guy with starting experience. So offensive line should be solid. Again, another ACC team with Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech. I like the offense.
Yeah, the offense is kind of what holds me to this team. I mean, obviously they were a terrible defensive team, really good offensive team last year, and I expect the same. Replacing the 1-0 lineman with a guy with experience from Middle Tennessee is huge. 3 of their top 4 receivers are back, so those are wide receivers. Obviously, the tight ends are gone. But I think they can replace them. Plus, this is more of a team that runs the ball anyway. They're 32nd in run frequency, 102nd in pass frequency. So this is clearly a team that wants to run the ball more, and I think they have that. Jamal Haynes is toward the top of the ACC in rushing. He'll be with Ott and Quinn Allen, those guys. So, this offense should be really good. The bigger part is the defense, which I think they improved coaching-wise, but your personnel has to also improve.
By the way, this was an offensive line that was 6th in the country in offensive line yards.
This is probably the best offensive line.
Now, they did play against a little bit of an easier schedule last year, and it's not quite the case this year, but still, offensive line should be generating some push for sure. But then we get to the defensive side of the ball, and this is where it kind of turns a little bit negative for Georgia Tech. Not that I think it's a disaster or anything, but only 2 returning starters on the defensive line. And by the way, Georgia defensive success rate last year at home, 130th. Like, this team just could not make stops at home. I mean, I guess it was a little better on the road, but defensive line numbers, terrible against the run, didn't generate much pressure at all. Not a great pass rush. So only 2 returning starters on a defensive line that wasn't very good last year. I will say they got an edge rusher back from injury that they like, and they also loaded up in the portal. They got a defensive tackle from Miami and an edge rusher from USC. So, I mean, I guess it has to go up just because it was so bad last year.
Yeah, the way that I thought this defense was ran, obviously when they hired Santucci, this is a guy who at Duke they geared a lot of what they do to stopping the run. And this team's statistically they were worse against the run last year. They're 122nd in yards per carry. But caveat to that, teams didn't really run on them that much. If you go through the frequencies, they were 11th in opponent pass frequency, 123rd in run frequency. So teams weren't really trying to run on them that much. Now, to the flip to that, this is now a conference where you're adding Preston Stone. A lot of great quarterbacks are coming in. So your run defense might be better, but you can't hurt your pass defense. And they lost some of their best corners, and they didn't add transfers. They added from lower level schools. So I think that they're going to be the completely reverse. I think their run defense will be a little bit better because obviously they were so bad at it when teams were trying to run, but they weren't really getting run on. But their pass defense, I think it'll be a little bit worse because the personnel is worse there. So I think this could be a completely different defense than it was last year. And I don't think it's really geared towards being successful in the conference that they're in now. This is a good quarterback conference now. And some guys that come in, they will throw all over this team.
And and what Andy said about the secondary, completely agree with. Now, I read that they brought in a kid from Tennessee that they like at corner or something. But yeah, definitely question marks on the defense. Here's the thing. Now we get to the shittiest thing of all for Georgia Tech. Their schedule.
Oh yeah, that's why I was going to say that.
Disaster.
I was going to say that if you preface the reason we're talking pretty glowingly about this team. Their number's 5 because they do get very unlucky. I mean,
this
obviously
is crazy.
Just their non-conference. If you read them out, they play VMI and Georgia State. Those are easy. They play Georgia and Notre Dame. Those are 2 of the top 7 teams in the country. So those are 2 really tough non-con games. Plus, they have to play pretty much every top of the line team in the ACC.
Every single
Clemson.
one of them.
Besides Clemson, they play the top 4 teams in the
Look
conference.
at their last 6 games of the schedule.
Yeah, they're probably not winning any of it. I think they can win North Carolina, but other than that, they're getting
it's at North Carolina. At North Carolina, Notre Dame, at Virginia Tech, that they'll probably get crushed. Virginia Tech's looked really good. Miami, NC State, at Georgia.
Yeah,
they're finishing the season 0-6, or like he said, maybe they could steal North Carolina. Maybe they could potentially steal Miami if that program hasn't sold by then. But yeah, theoretically that should be 0-6 to finish the season. And despite, maybe they're 5-1, 4-2.
With this number, what are they kind of lead? Because like usually when you look at a number like this, a 5, or you look at the win-loss game, there's like a game they're kind of hinting at. Like, oh, will they win or lose this one? What game are they hinting at here? Is it Louisville or is it? Because you can already. Syracuse? And by the way, at Syracuse isn't that's the thing. At Syracuse is the one that I'm looking at because I think Louisville you could probably chalk up as a loss anyway. They'll probably crush Duke, but like. Dude, well, where are the wins? Georgia State, VMI, Duke. That's 3 wins. Syracuse probably. You're kind of banking on them winning those 2 games in between that as well, Louisville and Syracuse. So 5 in a row. Unless but they're they're not going to drop any of those games. Yeah, they would have to not. They would have to also win. There's a game no way. Too. It's got to be under here. Because then they just push. So they'd have to be unless everybody thinks that this Florida. I thought the line for the Florida State game was oddly close. It's only 2 touchdowns. I think they're like 4 touchdowns better than Georgia Tech, but that game's in Ireland, so maybe they catch them sleeping. But this is an under just because this is a brutal schedule, and I think it'll kind of stunt the way that we look at Georgia Tech going into next year. But I think that sucks too because I think this team could have been like a 7-8 win team with a normal schedule. I know. But this playing Notre Dame is weird for them. That's a weird game for them to play. But Haynes King is only a junior. Hear me out. They win 4 games this year. Haynes King comes back for his senior year. We bet Georgia Tech sleeper to win the ACC in 2025. I could see that. I'd see if Haynes a senior this year. I don't know. That was a let me check. Huge keeping Jamal Haynes too, but he's a junior.